Hey y'all, Boogie Night here, and last night three masochists sat down and watched a movie together. Look, it takes a lot for a movie to successfully mind flip me. Y'all know that. It can be from a varying degree of reasons such as god-awful acting or possible follow plot. It doesn't matter. I still have a very high threshold before I finally hit that mind-blown what moment. Now, up until recently, only Monkey King with 72 Magic held the crown jewels of the Mind Flood Nation. And in the last movie I reviewed, Birdemic decided to take up the throne as Queen of the Mind Flood, but that still leaves a spot open for Prince and Successor. And then the movie I watched last night with Quo and Morgues decided to take up that spot. And that is a movie called American Commando 2 Hunting Express. Now, Quo, Morgues, and I originally watched this movie because we thought we were getting ourselves into a Godfrey Ho movie, which in turn means a shenanigans movie. But then, after the first few minutes, we started scratching our heads. In the next few minutes after that, it took a very dark turn, and I thought to myself, this cannot be a Godfrey Ho movie. Now, blessedly enough, the ever-resourceful guest looked up the director's name, and we came to the foregone conclusion, it was not Godfrey Ho. So I kind of went into this movie with a little different perspective, but that still doesn't mean I liked the movie. In fact, I despise this movie. I found it incredibly reprehensible. Now, before I go into those reasons why, I can already hear yourself scratching your heads thinking, well, if this wasn't a Godfrey Ho movie, you would have seen it on the credits. You would have seen this was directed by somebody else. Well, don't get ahead of yourselves. Let me explain why we thought this was a Godfrey Ho movie. First of all, American Commando 2 comes before American Commando 3. And American Commando 3 Savage Temptation was directed by the one and only Godfrey Ho. Secondly, producer Joseph Lai and his production team, using that term very loosely, that is known as IFD or the AAV Creative Unit, was involved with a lot of Godfrey Ho movies. Not just the American Commando trilogy, but also Ninja Champion and Ninja Terminator, to name a few. In fact, Joseph Lai is pretty much the other half of Godfrey Ho. Those two pretty much almost worked exclusively together on movies. So that was kind of another piece of the puzzle right there. Third, Godfrey Ho has been known to employ the dynamic duo Sean O'Dell and the arcane and mysterious god of the Kung Fu movies, Pierre Kirby. Pierre Kirby was in American Commando 2 and 3, so once again, Godfrey Ho reference right there. But finally, and probably most important, is Godfrey Ho is known to use a number of pseudonyms and nicknames, such as Charles Lee and some other stuff in his movies. He's got more aliases under his belt than Sam and Dean Winchester. So when the opening credits came up and we saw a Joseph Light production and directed by Philip Coe, my first comment was, wait a second, you're not fooling anyone, Godfrey. And since I've seen at least 6 Godfrey Ho movies, I went into this thinking it was a Godfrey Ho movie. Morgues went into it as a thinking it was a Godfrey Ho movie. And Quo, I don't know how many Godfrey Ho movies Quo has seen. I think he's seen more than just American Commando 3. I could be wrong. But he went into this thinking it was a Godfrey Ho movie. Naturally, we all did. And once again, as I've said before, Godfrey Ho is notorious for having shenanigans in his movies. Pretty much involuntary. So as a quick background for those of y'all who are just joining me on the Sonic Boogie project, Godfrey Ho was a Hong Kong director back in the 70s and 80s who was notorious for taking two movies that had nothing to do with each other and splicing them together into one, can't even say cohesive movie with a straight face, one movie, one confusing movie. It usually involves some sort of drama and then some sort of kung fu themed shenanigans. And those movies are delightfully trashy. They are fantastic. This movie was the complete opposite. And even though Pierre Kirby and Sean O'Dell were in this and they were their usual shenanigans self, this movie was just a piece of shit. This movie was horrible. And maybe it's partially because I went into it thinking it was a Godfrey Ho movie and that was the baseline. It could be, but I was having a conversation with Larry and the Mage earlier, and he actually liked AC2 more than AC3, and he actually participated in that movie night when we saw AC3 Savage Temptation. But then again, he doesn't really know the source material of Godfrey Ho as Morgues and I do. So While this doesn't change the fact, even going into it with an open mind, as we did after finding out the director was different, finding this movie was just borderline heinous, if this is a movie you plan to see, and you are a Godfrey Ho fan, which, all zero of you excluding, Cuomo and I, you've got to go into it with an open mind. But that movie still was awful, and I never thought I would say that about a Joseph Lai flick. So with that being said, here are the reasons why I just could not stand this movie. Larian, that's water. I don't drink clear liquor. I am a bourbon man. Sometimes a brandy man. Mostly bourbon. Anyway, so, of course, it's easy to become mind-flooded by a Godfrey Ho movie because of his, you take 2 points and mesh them together and try and form something. American Commando 2 pretty much had at least 3 plots going together. Now, before I go into this, let me just get the plot out of the way in a nutshell, because that's the easiest thing to talk about. American Commando 2 follows a woman, Judy, who seemingly meets a man, I think his name was Tony, I forget, and they go on a date, and he falls in love with her, and she's like being all, playing hard to get, and blah, blah, blah. But it turns out she is forced into prostitution by her boyfriend George, who in turn works for the evil mastermind of this company, Pierre Kirby. I will be honest, when Pierre Kirby appeared, ping, I kind of squeed. I think Mortgues 2 did as well. Quo might have, I don't know. He's new to the Critics Couch sessions, and I look forward to seeing more movies with him. Anyway, so she's trying to break free, and even though Tony, I'm just going to call him the male protagonist, non-Sean O'Dell male protagonist, he's in love with her. He finds out that she's a prostitute. He gets pissed, but he still loves her. I know, very melodramatic, I love you stories. She's abused by George. George starts to find out that she saw Tony, or non-Sean O'Dell male protagonist, and somehow amidst all that, they come back together, they run away together. George seeks them out, she gets shot, he gets shot but survives. I'm trying to piece that together. And somewhere involved with all this, Sean O'Dell's character is trying to get back at Pierre Kirby's character. See, I'm already mind-flooded just trying to go over the plot points, but even beyond the plot points, there are subplots beyond subplots beneath subplots. And it was just poorly orchestrated, and of course, that's going to be the cinematography facet of it, about why it was awful as well. But it was so hard to follow just in general. There's one scene, and Quo brought this up flawlessly, is we were watching a flashback where Judy's friend, or maybe it was a family member, I don't know, goes to non-Sean O'Dell to explain how she got herself into this position. That position. You see what I did there? As to why she got herself to be forced into prostitution. But it was flashback within a flashback to a side flashback to back to the original flashback to another sub-flashback of different degree. It was like a 3-card Monty Matryoshka effect. And if you're unfamiliar with what a Matryoshka effect is, a Matryoshka is, well, here in America we call them nesting dolls. That's kind of the doll inside the doll inside the doll inside the doll. It was basically one of those. It was just all over the place. So at the end of it, when it pops back to the present, Quo, he goes, wait, I didn't realize that this was a flashback. And I'm like, yeah, if it wasn't for certain aspects, I would have been completely mind-flooded by the fact it was a flashback within a flashback. I mean, it completely slipped my mind. But it was just this constant, back and forth. It was so hard to follow. And then it could be following Judy's character. It could be following Sean O'Dell's character. It could be following non-Sean O'Dell's character. And there's some piece that's holding, maybe Sean O'Dell has an encounter with Judy's ex-roommate. It was so hard to follow. It's like that point in Spaceballs when it's like, I'm your father's, uncle's, mother's, brother's, sister's former roommate. What does that make us? Absolutely nothing. That's exactly what that was. The plot itself was basically a will it blend plot. And like I said, I've seen Godfrey Ho movies. I know how somehow they kind of fall into place, but at some point they do fall into place. Maybe very subtly, maybe about as subtle as a brick to the balls, but this could not. There was no real way to figure it out in the least bit. And that was the first big reason why I hated it. Secondly, once again, the plot. It was so dark, and I'm not saying that about the lighting quality. Well, the lighting quality was poor to begin with as well. This was just horribly and morally heinous. It was, there's abuse against women, there's physical violence against them, and I'm not trying to sound like a social justice warrior. I'm just trying to explain how uncomfortable this made not just me, but Quo and more guests as well. There's a lot of physical violence, of slapping around Judy and whatnot. There's a scene where George rapes her in full detail with her screaming. I mean, it doesn't show the rape as a whole, but she's screaming, she's swatting at him, he's laughing the whole time. I'm just thinking, it's a little too close to comfort. And remember, when I reviewed Ninja Champion very back in the day, it was a rape revenge movie. So I've got a fairly strong stomach. I mean, plus I've seen Sallow and Caligula, and Island of Death, where there's a scene where Chris bangs a goat. I'm no social justice warrior when it comes to that sort of, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hang on. Let me rephrase that. I've got a strong stomach when it comes to scenes like that, but with all the amount of rape and beating and black eyes and forced starvation, it's not just an anti-shenanigans movie. It was just hard to watch. I mean, I'm not saying I sympathize with Judy per se, and I'm going to talk about why I think all the characters in the movie were just morally reprehensible pieces of garbage. It was just, and it didn't give you a chance to breathe. It would be like, forced violence scene here, she gets backhanded here. He fakes committing suicide to try and win her back, and then right immediately after that, he rapes her, and then she gets drunk, and then this happens, and then this happens. I talk about when I reviewed The Wind That Shakes the Barley about how it didn't give you a chance to catch your breath. That was fine. I could deal with that. This just couldn't. And if you're laughing at me, I encourage you just to watch American Commando 2 for those scenes alone, because you will be squirming in your seat for all the wrong reasons. Three, obviously, were the characters. And all the characters, like I said, were morally reprehensible and god-awful. And even the villainous Pierre Kirby, who does a damn good job of being a villain, as much as it pains me to say that, were just awful in their own way. Obviously, I mean, you're meant to feel some sympathy for Judy because she was forced into prostitution and had to take whatever steps she could to get away from it. But she never really took an actual stand to get away from George. I mean, the opening scene is where she is traveling to another city and lying to him on the phone saying like, oh, I'll see you in a little bit. And you don't really know what her line of work is by that point. But still, she has every opportunity to break away. She can fly the coop at any given time. I mean, there is a point within, the Matryoshka flashback where her passport has been confiscated. But that still means it's a big country. She has the ability to get away from the city and hide somewhere or work with somebody to get out of it. But she was the most passive person, even when she was flirting with Sean O'Dell. It's like, I mean, seriously, it's like, she was like, you could put a wet paper towel next to her and the wet paper towel had more of a spine. And I apologize if it paints me in an unflattering light. I mean, I understand it's hard to get out of an abusive relationship. Trust me, I've been in an abusive relationship before. But eventually, when you hit rock bottom, you hack up and you say, I'm going to take steps to get out of here. And don't even get me started about George. Oh my God, what a piece of shit. He is the embodiment of all that is unholy with the world today. I mean, between his faking suicide to try and win her back, his beating of her on multiple occasions, his multiple raping of her, God. I mean, And then you have non-Sean O'Dell's character, who was not. I'm not just gonna call him blissfully naive. He definitely takes steps to be, a complete, piece of shit. I mean, he's talking to his colleagues and his friends and be like, I love her so much, even though we've only been on 2 dates, but she kissed me, man, and she refuses to give me her phone number. Hey, let's go out and get drunk, and hey, let's go to a den of ill repute. That's actually how he finds out that she's a prostitute, was they get drunk on sake or some sort of rice liquor, and then they go out and decide to go to a, as it's called in the movie, a specialty clinic, which turns out to be, obviously, like I said, a den of ill repute. Two-Face much? Mm-hmm. And then you have Sean O'Dell's girlfriend, who also was working for Pierre Kirby, which as some sort of scam artist, I guess. I don't know. Could be. And he was kind of she was basically a slave to Pierre Kirby, even though she only had 2 scenes at the beginning and the end, when she finally hacked up and decided to actually take revenge at the very end and become the heroine, even though she looked like she was on every drug known to man throughout the course of the movie. In fact, she probably was, because that would just tie into the dark theme of this movie to begin with. I mean, like I said, I have an undying love for Pierre Kirby, and not just because he was only in about a dozen movies before he disappeared off the earth. And as a villain, he does a damn good job. But just the overall morality of him being this head honcho of a prostitution ring, and whatnot, and how he just is completely soulless, which is the role he's trying to fulfill, and I give him credit for that. But just, you cannot look past him being this villain after seeing him in so many other movies as the good guy. It just doesn't fit. If Pierre Kirby was as a villain in most movies that he was in, I mean, yeah, okay, I could take that. But it was basically a twist of the skull in a 180 direction to see him as that. Like I said, Sean O'Dell's character was the only one that I could deal with, and because he was basically lawfully good, to use the D&D. Yeah, he had his naivete because he thought, his girlfriend was actually legit before he found out she was using him, and then he sought to take down Pierre Kirby's company and try and save the prostitutes. That was the only shining aspect of the characters that I can deal with. And of course, the final thing I want to talk about is the character interaction. But that ties into, once again, the overall constantly shifting plots back and forth. The interaction was terrible with each other. I talked about Judy and non-Sean O'Dell's characters and her blissful naivete and whatnot. But there's scenes, and of course, like I said, she's, very naive, very passive, and that's just her character. There are scenes, like on their first date, non-Sean O'Dell's character, as Quo said, was mansplaining. He's like, there is literally a scene when, and of course, you can chalk it to being nervous. I am the most charmless person. I don't even want to recap half the first dates that I've been on. He's like, well, this is a restaurant, and you eat food on plates. And there are also scenes where he tries to wax philosophical with various things, and at this point, if Bijou Demon was here, she and I would be screaming symbolism and ask me what it means to each other, because it had no part. And there are scenes when I know Judy's character was just smiling and nodding. I mean, at the very end before the shooting, non-Sean O'Dell was basically like, I love the snow. It's white. It's pure. It means a fresh start. How does this even fit into a Godfrey Ho movie? It's like Godfrey picked up a Lord Byron book, or not Godfrey Ho, sorry, excuse me. I'm so hooked on the fact that I thought this was a Godfrey Ho movie. Philip Coe or Joseph Light, did they pick up a Lord Byron novel, leaf through a few passages and highlight and go, yeah, let's stick this in there because this movie could not be confusing enough as it is. Or things are, and Pierre Kirby's character was kind of almost like a character from Strike Commando, as Harkov brought up after the fact. There's a scene in Strike Commando, which was a Bruno Mattei movie with Reb Brown, another awesomely piece of garbage movie. And the character, I think his name was Jakota, is like, get up and see what you do with your fists. Pierre Kirby's character was such a tyrant. Obviously, once again, that was his character, but he was just such a tyrant to everybody that he worked with. You know, whether it was his immediate colleagues, whether it was his underlings, it doesn't. Whether it was Sean O'Dell's girlfriend, it was just horrible. I mean, there's a scene when Pierre Kirby's character smacks her, you know, like gives her, you know, the rule of 3, and then he's like, "Now you're going to tell me why." I'm sorry, shouldn't you threaten her before the physical violence? And of course, she just kind of clammed up after that, rightfully so. She doesn't want to get hurt or anything like that, but still, it was like the aggression of Pierre Kirby to her being passive, and then at the very end, becoming this She-Hulk. And even though I really wished it was Judy becoming the She-Hulk and just ripping the shit out of George, I would have paid top dollar to see that. But it was just things like that, or Sean O'Dell's character when he sees, I think it was his girlfriend, it could have been somebody different. He's like, "What are you doing here? Why?" Just these very flat questions that had nothing to do with the conversation. It was like his scenes were shot, then her scenes were shot, and then it was edited for this, and this, and like shuffling a deck of cards. That's what the whole kind of character development was. It felt like nothing was done in the same scene or the same take. It felt like everything was just done completely separate and just completely ad-libbed. Like the script was basically kind of Mad Libs and saying, we can do this, have fun. And that's what it was for me. Once again, I've seen a lot of Godfrey Ho movies, and even though this was not Godfrey, it was still directed by Joseph Lai, and I still kind of had some sort of baseline of expectations. Whether it was a shenanigans movie or not, this movie was just bad in general. And while I can't recommend it, if you are a fan of Pierre Kirby and Sean O'Dell and you have 90 minutes to burn, go for it. Like I said, but once again, go into it with an open mind. That's the only way you're going to get past this movie without being mind flooded in the worst way. Well, not the worst way. Monkey King still holds that one. But anyways, y'all, that's my rant for it. I know some of y'all love hearing angry reviews from me, but there you go. Other than that, I hope y'all have a fantastic evening, and I'll catch you on the flip side, alright? Peace.